All right, so we're gonna talk about functions and relations right now, but before we do that, we have to talk about some vocabulary. So what qualifies what a relationship is? It's a set of ordered pairs. So remember, ordered pairs are like x, like 3 comma 2, right? So it's a whole bunch of those. And it's always written in set notation. And what that means is we write it using these little squiggles, and it's like 1 comma 2 and like 1 comma 3 and then n squiggle. So that's what I mean by set notation. So it's got the little squiggles to say those ordered pairs are together. Okay, so let's talk about what the domain is. So the domain is all the x values. Oh, it's the set of x coordinates. So what that means is simply all the x values, and your range is all of your y values. So it's the set of y coordinates of the relation. And what's important about both of these? So there's something important about both. And what is important is that they need to be ordered from least to greatest. So that applies to both of these things, right? So it applies to both. So both of these need to be ordered from least to greatest, okay? So let's just practice that. So looking below, we are given this relation. And we know it's a relation because it's a set of, it's a set of ordered pairs that are using set notation, right? So it uses these little squiggles. If you need help writing those, what I do is just kind of draw like a jut out to a point. I go from the point and jump back down. If you just want to do like a little squiggly, that's fine too, just so I at least know what set note, like that you're trying to put in set notation. Okay, so remember, an ordered pair is written x comma y, right? So the domain is your x values. All right, so we want to put all of our x values in order from least to greatest, right? Because that's what it says, ordered from least to greatest. Okay, but let's first figure out what all of our x values are. So 2, 1, 2, 0, 1, 3. Okay, so we always start with the smallest number, which is 0. And then the next one is 1, and then 2. So there's 2 1s and 2 2s, right? I don't need to write them multiple times. I just write it once. So no matter how many there are, I just write it one time. And then we have to also put this in set notation. Okay, so that also needs to use the little squiggles. All right. Range is our y values. Range is our y values. So we need to order those from least to greatest. So we have what? -6, 0, and 4. Again, if it's written multiple times, you just write it once. So does that make sense? So we just ordered all of the y values, right? Y values. And all of our x values. And that's simply all there is for finding the domain and range, okay? But we have another definition to talk about. So we have another definition to talk about, and that is, all right. Okay, so the next thing we have is, what is a function? So a function is a relation which the domain, which remember is your x, does not repeat. So that's super important. Our x cannot repeat. So like looking at this example above, where we had 2 1s and 2 2s, that's not a function because it repeats, right? So it's a function in which, it's a relation in which does not repeat the x values. So how can you tell the difference is the question, right? So there's two ways. The first way is for every x value, there is only one y value. We just said that, right? And then the other way is that it passes a vertical line test. I'm doing terrible at spelling today. Line test. And we'll talk about what a vertical line test is once we get there, okay? Next one is how can you tell if its relation is not a function, right? So again, there's a couple of different ways. If an x value has more than one y value, a number in the domain is repeated, or it fails the vertical line test. So the first two kind of say the same thing. If the x value has more than one y value, so that's we'll show you what a function map looks like, and that's what that really relates to. If a number in the domain is repeated, so that's like given the next example, we'll see what that is. And then the vertical line test is if given a graph, what that means. Okay, so we'll keep on practicing this, but let's just keep on going with on to example 2. All right, so example 2, given this relation, find the domain and range and tell me if it's a function. Okay, so remember, domain is your x values. So our x values are 3, 7, 0, -2, -5, and 3. So remember, we put these in order from least to greatest. So we should put -5 then. We should put -2. If it helps you to cross them off as we go, that works. We should put 0. And then we have 2 3s. So remember, we only put that once. And then we put a 7. And then we need to find the range, which is your y values. So our y values, we have to put those in order from least to greatest. So what we have -1, we have 0, we have 2 2s, so we only put that once. We have 3, and then 4. Okay, so we have our x and our y values, right? But we need to figure out if this relation is a function, right? And remember, if it is a function, your x values can't repeat. Did we have any repeating x values? Hopefully you're shaking your head. Yes. 3, right? 3 appeared twice. So it repeated. So then it is not a function. No, because 3 repeated in domain. So we don't care if our y values, we don't care if our range repeats, we care if our domain repeats. Okay, so let's look at more examples. So let's go to the next page. Okay, so example 3 is given a bunch of different examples, and we want to figure out if each one is a function or not. And we want to circle if it's function or not, a function accordingly. Okay, so again, for it to not be a function, our x cannot repeat, right? So x values can't repeat if function. Okay, so that's important to remember. So if it's a function, they can't repeat. Okay, so looking at this first example here, looking down at your x values, do you see any of them repeating? Do you see a -2 again, a -1, a 0, a 1, or a 2? No, so those all didn't repeat, right? So it's a function. All right, so since none of my x values repeated, it's a function. I'm going to go down instead of across. So I'm looking at this next one, this input and output. This is called a function map. So looking at these, do any of them repeat? And what I mean by that, do any of them have multiple lines coming off of them? So 3 goes to one place, 4 goes to one place, but 2 goes to 2 places. Since it goes to 2 different places, this means it repeats. And if it repeats, it's not a function. Okay? The next type is looking at it on a graph. So we do what's called the vertical line test. So vertical line test. And what that means is we just draw a line straight down the graphs. If it crosses the vertical line test more than once, not a function. So let me zoom in a little bit here and talk and write that in. So vertical line test, that's zoomed too much. Okay. If it crosses once. Not a function if it crosses multiple times. So looking at this, how many times did these lines cross that black line? They only cross one time each, so it is a function. Whereas, like, if I look at this next example and draw vertical lines, look, it crosses a whole bunch. Crosses once, twice, 3 times. This one crosses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So it crosses multiple times. Even though in one place it might only cross once, but in other places it crosses a whole bunch. So then it's not a function. Okay, so you have a couple left that I want you to try on your own. So there's a whole bunch left, right? So there's a bunch of graphs that you'll do the vertical line test, and then a table, and then a function map. So try those for me, and we'll go over those in class.